Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Friday News Lunch from the Bucks County Beacon. I'm KEVIN Mahoney.
And I'm Cyril Mychalejko.
And each week we'll serve up this week's top stories affecting our communities and the nation. And we hope you'll join us live every Friday at noon on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, X, although we'll see how long we're going to continue that. Or right on the Beacon's website at thebuckscountybeacon.com. We're going to need independent, community-supported progressive media in the weeks, months, and years ahead. There cannot be a better time to take a moment, head on over to buckscountybeacon.com and click on the Support the Beacon button, and become a supporter. Remember, you heard this from Emily Smith last week, right? We've got the $1 a month. If everyone who reads the Beacon contributed $1 a month, we could explode this entire news environment and create a sustainable future. So become a supporter. Head on over to buckscountybeacon.com and hit that Support the Beacon button. You can become a monthly supporter for as little as $5 a month, or even that $1 one is there. A yearly supporter for as little as $50 a year. You can even drop a one-time donation, help keep the Beacon's critical lens focused and sustainable. Let's see what we got on the menu this week, shall we? Oh, God. Well, Trump appointments. I think it's going to kind of take some time today on this one. Yep, they're going to help fast-track much of Project 2025 with a return to the neocon hawkery on the world stage as a little flavor on top. While Republicans in the mainstream media feign surprise and outrage or disbelief, Trump will be well-positioned to carry out much of his Agenda 47, his rebranding of much of Project 2025. And I got a feeling that we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about those policies coming up. And, if we want to see what this might look like for our public schools, we might want to follow what's happening in Oklahoma. Yes, a little more closely, perhaps. We might even get a new Office of Religious Liberty and Patriotism if we're lucky. I mean, they just got one. Bob Casey is still not conceded the PA Senate race to Republican challenger from Connecticut, Dave McCormick. An automatic recount was triggered since the margin separating the two is less than 0.5%. Now, Carter Walker from VoteBeat breaks all this down and what's going to happen and how this will proceed. It's a brand new article in the Bucks County Beacon. Do check it out. Meanwhile, the Republican Party is suing Bucks, Montgomery, and Center counties for counting undated mail-in ballots, despite a PA Supreme Court ruling say they should not count those votes. Bucks County Commissioner Diane Ellis Marseglia told the Philadelphia Inquirer, quote, "I think we all know that precedent by court doesn't matter anymore in this country," said County Commissioner Diane Marseglia, as she cast her vote on Thursday to count certain deficient provisional ballots previously barred by a court order. Yep, there you go. She says, hey, look, people violate the laws anytime they want now. So for me, if I violate those laws, it's because I want a court to pay attention. There's nothing more important than counting votes. Joan Cullen, you remember her? Blast from the past. Yes, the kind of like trolling high school student, former school director in Penridge, Joan Cullen. Well, he wants to make sure that those county commissioners are all prosecuted. That's right. Lock them up, Joan, right? Lock them up. And the exodus from Blue Sky from X continues as the former Twitter becomes a haven for extremists, misogynists, and racists, just like Elon Musk wanted. Yep, crazy. I'm there. Come on over to Blue Sky, folks. You got to check out Mike Gambone's review in the Bucks County Beacon of a great book called The Quiet Damage, QAnon and the Destruction of the American Family. Got to put that on your reading list. And we got some great shows coming up on The Signal, the podcast. Cyril is his interview show. Then this weekend, most likely on Sunday, we're going to hear a great interview with Rotimi Adeoye. Democratic Party needs a generational change in leadership, and he is a Daily Beast columnist and a former Central Bucks grad. How about that? And then we're also going to see next week a great interview with David Knoll, right? Vigilante Nation and how state-sponsored terror threatens our democracy. David Knoll is one of the co-authors with John Michaels of that book, and Cyril interviews him. So we got a lot coming up here. The Beacon is not going away. If anything, we're doubling down and digging in. Here we go. Cyril, welcome, man. It's been a while since we talked.
Yes, it has. Thanks to a little mosquito.
A little mosquito and a wedding. Congratulations! Cyril got married.
Thank you very much. Yes, I did.
But thanks to a mosquito, the mosquito, he didn't get married to the mosquito. Just so
No,
there's any clear.
the mosquito gave me the wedding gift of dengue. So
Yes.
I don't recommend it. The first 48 to 72 hours were complete hell. It felt like my brain was getting repeatedly stabbed. And
Wow.
for that reason, I was obviously unable to sleep. But luckily I was able to power through and this was like a week and a half before the wedding was scheduled and had family flying in. So it happened. It was beautiful. Best day of my life. So thank you, Kevin.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah, you bet. Yeah, and I bet sitting like, hey, like, let me see. I've got a wedding coming up and it's a presidential election. What would be a good idea? I got it. Dengue fever. Yeah. Let me put myself on death's door right before two of these major events. But oh my God, I'm so glad you made it through that. And all the better that you came out of that. And looks like you had an amazing wedding. As I said, y'all looked freaking phenomenal. Looks like there was so much fun to be had. So it's great to kind of have you back here too as well. But that's got to come first, obviously.
Sure. Yeah. But it's good to be back. And, like you said, we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
And the Bucks County Beacon is needed now more than ever. And we will be doubling down our efforts in the coming months and years.
100%. Well, I guess before I would like to talk about the all these appointments that have been coming up, and I think that's here. But before we jump in there, I'm curious. Since we really haven't had too much of a chance to talk except before the show today, just about kind of like reactions and responses to the election. I mean, where are you left with all this? I mean, now that the rest of the excitement of dengue and a wedding is settled down.
Yeah, I mean, I knew a Trump victory was a possibility.
Yeah.
I was a little disheartened by the fact that he won with the margins that he did, and that the Democratic Party bled about 9 million votes from 2020. At least as they're counted right now. Biden got about like 81.5, and I believe the latest count for Kamala Harris was like 72 and change, 72 million and change. So Trump lost votes as well, but that's something that needs to be addressed. I think Harris ran the best campaign that she could have run. I don't blame her, at all. Of course, could things have been done differently? Yeah, hindsight's 2020, right? Um, but I think the Democratic Party does have some kind of like soul searching to do, and we're in my conversation with Rotimi, who is a young Democrat. He's arguing for some more generational leadership change. At the very least, more inclusivity. With the youth wing of the party. Um, and I think that that's something also that locally, like Connor O'Hanlon has been a big proponent of, and he's been a leader locally in his own right already. um, so in addition to that, I think like the main kind of takeaway from this is don't mourn, organize, or mourn for a few days, but get ready to kind of get back into it, because there's a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of people are in the crosshairs,
Right.
of this new administration. Uh, People from the LGBTQ community, for one, we really need to support. Teachers are going to be in the crosshairs even more so than they already were. The Moms for Liberty, uh, wing, which I would also kind of group in, their kind of paramilitary arm with the Proud Boys, who had been kind of showing up at school board meetings. They're going to feel emboldened. Um, never mind the fact that, Trump has promised to abolish the Department of Education. So we have to continue to kind of organize politically in our local communities. The first line of defense is locally, right? And we have to remember that when we do organize ourselves, we can win. And that's what happened with the school board
Mhm.
elections, the previous election in Central Bucks and Penridge. So, there is hope within this kind of like darkness of the current moment right now with this new Trump administration.
Yeah, I think one of the hard truths is that organizing an infrastructure, of people with experience doing the organizing, experience kind of doing a building out an information infrastructure like with the beacon and stuff. It takes time, and the very, we've talked about this. How many times have we talked about this? I mean, how that the broad left, right, center to the left, has, I think, leaned a little too heavily upon having mainstream institutions do the heavy lifting for them, like, for example, like the New York Times, like academic institutions, right, like public schools, is kind of like leaning in on those institutions, say, oh, they're taking care of it, and not building out our own institutions, right? Our own kind of, information infrastructure, our own kind of process of organizing, right? It's always been something that you could kind of, oh, okay, oh, I could turn on MSNBC. That's it. No, that's not what we're talking about. And it's going to take time. But I mean, like you said, I was talking with folks in the Penridge Democrats, is I said virtually the same thing, is like, look, locally, we've already got the infrastructure started, right? I mean, that what people have done locally in the schools, right, around the school boards kind of elections, and kind of, and even what I'm talking, both getting elected, right, I mean, flipping seats on borough councils and things like this is really critical, about getting rid of the fascist kind of oriented Christian nationalist, moms for liberty oriented, however you want to frame it, the majorities out of those school boards in Central Bucks and in Penridge. The work that the community has done, parents have done with community members, is that's the core. And but it's going to be a slog, because it's not like we're doing this at a time where things are good. It's like having to do, play defense and offense at the same time, it seems.
Yeah, and this is just kind of like history repeating itself, and we have to make sure it repeats itself, because the history of the United States is a history of progressive social movements confronting and
Right.
overcoming the far right. And then there's a reason why the right wing school board members don't want that history taught, right? Because it's confrontational to their own views, worldview, and plans for the country. And obviously, like, independent grassroots media with the Bucks County Beacon and with what we're doing here with the podcast, like that's one part of it. And we're going to continue to support the work of local progressive communities here in Bucks County.
100%. And yeah, shout out to them all. And on that question of history and kind of teaching, just I'll give a little shout out. Great book by Jason Stanley, came out recently, called Erasing History, which is, I just finished it. It's a fantastic, fantastic book. I'm actually going to be teaching the same book next semester. And for folks looking for kind of really kind of accessible reading, some of the kind of history and things like this, it's a fantastic text. So do check it out. So Cyril, I mean, I've been going back and forth on this, especially this week, about, how much do we attempt to respond in the moment to the fire hose of like appointments and everything else that are coming out. And that's what it has been in many ways. And I want to say, like, and I want to, kind of dig in maybe to some of these appointments we find to say most egregious and what that means. But one of the, I think the, I guess broader takeaway that I take from this is like, you know, the far right, you know, people coming out of the Heritage Foundation with the planning of the, you know, Project 2025, that kind of moving in this kind, you know, Agenda 47 that Trump ran his thing. They learned from the last time around, right? They learned that, you know, look, Trump is going to be this kind of disaster, this agent of chaos and all this stuff. But there was a lot of those mainstream right-wing, well, I shouldn't say mainstream, but right-wing institutions, well-funded right-wing institutions, were not necessarily on the same page as Trump or were very skeptical of it. And so they spent a lot of time kind of like fiddling around with like, how do you do these appointments? This time, it's pretty clear to me that they're not wasting any time this time. They've got their list of people. Some of them were a little bit more unexpected than others, but these are people that are designated to do exactly what is in that kind of agenda. What Steve Bannon famously talked about, like the dismantling of the administrative state. But so, I mean, I don't know if you want to, you know, pick out some kind of specific egregious examples of this, of some of these appointments, but, you know, I mean, I don't even know where to start half the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real rogues gallery. But like you said, like this shows, like, you know, Trump was saying after the election victory, you know, promises made, promises kept.
Right.
And he's assembling a team to make sure he keeps those promises to his MAGA base about completely transforming American society and rolling it back to the 1950s, if not the 1850s,
Yeah.
with race relations in this country. I mean, the most obvious, I think, I mean, there's a bunch, but for me at least, one of the worst picks has to be Matt Gaetz as Attorney General.
My
I mean,
God.
that's just, you know, here's someone who allegedly, you know, raped a 17-year-old and was doing drugs with them and partying with them, which maybe, you know, that's on brand for Trump, given his
Yep.
background. But he's one of the most, you know, extremist members of Congress, and essentially just a lawless person to put as the top lawmaker in the country. And you know that he is just going to be an obedient shock trooper
Yep.
for the Trump administration, and he will do whatever he's told to do, and that puts a target on, you know, many people in society and in institutions. I'm hopeful that he might not get approved. You know, there's already a few Republican senators who have come out, you know, like Lisa Murkowski and Senator Collins, I believe, have both said that, you know, this is essentially a joke.
We'll see. I mean, seriously, because essentially a lot of these appointments, Matt Gaetz probably being the most like in your face examples, like, are you going, this is like a loyalty test, right? This is what I want you to do. This is my loyalty test. But at the same time, you know, I have personally have been extraordinarily frustrated with, hearing all this stuff about like, well, maybe they won't, you know, the reporting about maybe these Republicans will turn and they're not going to confirm them. During his last administration, the solution to that was having acting people everywhere. You could appoint an acting attorney general if they don't want to, and then never put them up for nomination. And you're still going to essentially do the same thing. I mean, like, it's been blowing my mind, the lack of historical memory just of that. Because it's like, where, like, did we not learn that? It's like, yeah, I have no doubt if Matt, look, Trump, and we also know Trump doesn't give a crap about Matt Gaetz. I mean, Trump doesn't give a crap about any of this stuff. So it might be in his, like, he might love the fact just to kind of like, you know, own the libs, to throw Matt Gaetz out there, right? Someone who was famously on the floor of the House of Representatives showing pictures on his phone of women that he's, young girls, women that, well, who knows which one they were, girls or women, like that they were, you know, who he slept with over the past weekend.
Yeah. And then, you know, and we'll see if this House Ethics Panel report comes out. So, like, I don't know how much of this was coordinated, but he resigned from the House of Representatives, you know, essentially to kind of with the hopes of blocking this report from coming out. So we'll see. We'll see if they vote to release it anyway, or if some, patriotic Democratic lawmaker leaks it to the
Right.
press. Right?
Or like, okay, where all these Republicans say that they can't stand Matt Gaetz, right? That he should never be in Congress. They wanted to get rid of him. Well, guess what?
Yeah.
This isn't a time to step up to the plate and then release the damn thing, right? Whether it's through a vote to kind of release it or whether it's just kind of leaking it to the press. I mean, come on. I mean, it's like we cannot do the same thing again too, as well, of kind of trying to kind of like separate out, like we're like kind of getting ready to prep a big meal, like separate out different categories of Republicans. Well, maybe this one is like because they really truly in their heart believe that it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
This is all your actions now, pals. Right? Unless you're going to step up and you're actually going to do the right thing, it doesn't matter. Unless you're going to go on the record and kind of be an act of kind of like a voice against this and vote against these kind of extreme measures, doesn't matter. You're a Republican and you are confirming that this is not a Donald Trump problem. It's a Republican Party problem.
Well, and Trump was already floating the idea of recess appointments to just kind of go around the whole Senate confirmation, which speaks to the fact that he doesn't want to govern; he just wants to rule. Right?
Exactly.
Difference.
100%. So you've got Matt Gaetz here. Another guy we got here. This Peter Hegseth, right? The Fox News host, right, is going to be coming in as kind of defense secretary. He's being appointed. This is a guy who has also been accused of sexual assault, right? And is also a guy who has kind of Christian nationalist / white supremacist tattoos all over his body. Right? I mean, here's another guy that gives us a little sensitive window into this world.
Yeah, just completely unqualified for the position. But he will, again, carry out the Donald Trump's plan to purge generals from their position. Like he wrote a book about like getting rid of quote unquote anyone that's like woke. In the military. And so that'll be everyone that has kind of like spoken out against Trump. And he also kind of like represents like the RFK wing of the MAGA base, because apparently a few years back he gave an interview saying like he hasn't washed his hands in 10 years because he doesn't believe in germs because he can't see them. These are the geniuses, the best and the brightest that Trump is assembling.
Yeah, and like says like and like we're going to build up our resistance by just kind of kind of like licking every doorknob you can or something. I don't know. It's like we're going to see this dude walking through the Capitol licking doorknobs just to kind of like make sure that he's strong.
Like to see like foreign leaders shake his hand. It's just like
no, exactly. Go like this. Here you go, buddy. But I mean, we go right down the. I mean, there's no way we could talk about all these, but they got Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, Robert F. Kennedy, Health and Human Services, which is astonishing. Elise Stefanik, right, UN ambassador. We got Tom Homan as like a border czar, right? You've got who's the other one I want? Oh yeah, Kristi Noem, right, Secretary of Homeland Security. Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence. Lee Zeldin, a climate denier, head of the EPA. Right. I mean, and then we have like the fictional creation by will and fiat of the government Department of Government Efficiency, or Doge, right, being to be headed by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. I mean, what the hell, man? Yeah,
the Health and Human Services is obviously horrifying. With the anti-vaxxer RFK Jr. He's essentially going to make polio great again, right? And other like smallpox and other diseases. Who else? Kristi Noem is Homeland Security czar. That's horrifying.
Yeah, she's the one who famously like campaigned and passed all the kind of anti-LGBTQ rules. Went after trans kids, right? And has been vicious when it comes to anybody not in this kind of Christian nationalist kind of white kind of like vision of the world. And she's going to be head of Homeland Security.
And she's been banned by a bunch of Native American tribes from kind of entering the reservations because of her treatment of them. Yeah, Trump is he's just showing us that how he's going to govern, right?
Yep.
He's not trying to kind of like compromise or do middle of the road, which you and I never thought he would do. But yeah, this shows that you know it it makes me think, like, when have the Democrats ever kind of like really pushed bold progressive appointments like this?
Right.
I I can't ever remember. Maybe since FDR, right? Maybe FDR was the last person to kind of assemble a team of progressives around him.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
LBJ, you can make an argument for LBJ about doing that to a certain degree over here like this. I guess you have to be referred to only by your initials. So I guess our next hope is AOC, right? That's my there you go. Right. But no, seriously, I mean, it's like it's true. But I'll have to say, like, this is where, again, not to constantly, like, trumpet this idea. I shouldn't say trumpet, but to kind of like announce, but to champion this idea, but about the building of kind of like independent media sources in order to kind of do this work. Like, I remember when ahead of a year before Biden was elected in 2020, the American Prospect put out this thing called a day one agenda. Right. And basically what they did is they went and they got a bunch of experts that were, kind of understood the way that, government worked, the way that all these different organizations work, and put together an agenda. Because everyone was saying at the time, well, what are we going to do if Mitch McConnell is still in charge? They're going to block it. Right. And Democrats were already preparing the ground to say, look, we're going to throw our hands up in the air. There's nothing we can do because Congress, because of this. And what the American Prospect did is they went through like agency by agency and think about here are the things that Biden can do, right, in the first 100 days, right, that does not require Mitch McConnell or a stamp of the Senate to do. And most of those things had to do with just like making executive decisions about the enforcement of particular laws that were already on the books. Right, stuff that was already within the power of the president to do that. That's what the purpose of the executive, basically saying that you got to enforce these laws. Right. And instead of basically choosing like to go after kind of say low level tax evaders, no, you're basically going to direct the IRS to concentrate on kind of like, tax fraud among the kind of like the top 1%. Right. Those laws are already there. Right. It's just a decision about how you're going to execute those laws. And they went through and they did that. And of course, Biden did maybe like a fraction of that kind of stuff. But I think that's the kind of mentality like that we need to kind of like be thinking about, that kind of planning ahead for those bold actions that you're talking about.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. And it's like, it's just, and I look at, I go back to what we said earlier before about, about the importance of the local. And I don't know how much you follow this, what's been going on in Oklahoma. But I think it's one of these examples that's really, I think, important for us to see, to understand how these policies are going to be coming down. Because it's on the one hand to be looking at Project 2025, and it's this kind of like Heritage Foundation funded document, right, to plan for the next administration. It's another thing to look at Agenda 47, like the Trump branded version of that, and say, here are these policies that they're claiming to do. But what does that actually mean in terms of how this stuff comes down? And I'll give you this one example. This is from the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, as it is called, of Oklahoma, the State Department of Education. His name is Ryan Walters. And on November 7th, right, 2 days after the election, right, he basically sends out a letter to parents and CCs all the Oklahoma public school superintendents on this, and says, well, look, Trump administration is going to come in. They want to eliminate the Department of Higher Education, and we are going to cooperate fully in this. So what is this going to mean that you need to prepare yourself for? And to give the list, it says, we are going to champion parents' rights. The Biden administration labeled parents as threats and tried to silence their concerns. States would restore control will ensure parents' voices are not just heard but respected. Ending social indoctrination in classrooms. Federal funds have been used to force radical agendas like promoting boys and girls sports and pushing divisive gender and racial ideologies. With block grants, states could reject these mandates and focus on real education over propaganda. Protecting patriotism in the curriculum. Schools are pressured to teach books that undermine American values and ignore the truth about American history. By removing federal overreach, states can make sure that students learn patriotic curriculum that respects our country and honors our shared heritage. Then it goes on to talk about illegal immigration. It goes on to talk about foreign influence in schools and stuff. And says, as we prepare for important and impactful changes in the public education policy in the coming months, Oklahoma State Department of Education will be directing agency resources to ensure the above priorities are championed and the Oklahoma schools are equipped to smoothly adapt while maintaining the highest standards, blah, blah, blah. Then, just 3 days ago, they established a new department or new section within our new office within the Department of Public Education. What is it called? The Office of Religious Liberty and Patriotism, to ensure that those values of religious liberty and patriotism, and we all know what those code words are for, are going to be enforced and taught in Oklahoma public schools. And now, look, I understand we are not Oklahoma in terms of we have a Democratic governor, right? Thank God the Democrats held on to the state house. Those are all good things, but that shows us what is happening in those conversations in those circles and what we need to be prepared for in our boards of education, right? At the at the state level, but in our backyards, because that's what they did before, and this is these are their marching orders.
Absolutely. I mean, states like Oklahoma, Texas, Florida, they provide a window into what the plans for the entire country are.
Right.
And it underscores how important, keeping the governorship in Democratic hands here in Pennsylvania and the state legislature here in Pennsylvania is, because really we're just a couple of votes, a couple House seats and one governorship away from becoming Oklahoma or Florida or Texas. And
Yep.
it's, as we've seen this last election, it's not, beyond the realm of possibility.
No, it's not. It's not. And I think that, again, going back to how important it has been to see the organizing that's been happening around our schools, is like we've already got a taste of it, right? I mean, the taste of that bitter, rancid taste of these far right principles infecting our schools the taste is still fresh in people's mouths, right? And so again, here we go. Right. We already know what to do. And, we've already started to hear calls out for it. I want to echo that here too, as well, is like, look, it's understandable. A lot of those big fights were exhausting. But now people need to start showing up at Board of Education meetings again. It's time. And I've heard this call directly from a couple people now, that say, look, our school board, we elected them, and now we need to start showing up for them because some of the crazies are already starting to show up at these meetings.
Yeah, they are relentless, and there has been like a downtick of progressive attendance at these meetings, and it's dangerous. Like you said, like the school board, these new Democratic majority school boards, they need our support, and also just for on the media level, when you cede the kind of the soapbox to the far right, where they're going to control the narrative, and more often than not, media outlets, especially here in Bucks County with like the Courier Times or the Herald, they're just going to dutifully embrace these narratives and regurgitate them in their reporting, especially if there's no voices pushing back at the meetings. They're not going to go out of their way to actually call people to get any kind of dissenting opinions. You can count on that.
Absolutely. And I think that, it'd be a really cool, idea, but more about a practice. I've seen some like parents, for example, who have been showing up for board meetings, doing really fantastic summaries of what's going on, and sending out stuff ahead of time after they've read carefully the agendas. Here's some of the things we need to be watching for, and then doing kind of afterward. I would love it if we get this kind of parents, people who attend these meetings to take that next step and say, okay, let's start kind of publishing that stuff out, right? Not just sharing it to just kind of private Facebook groups, but actually, let's actually start channeling that into places like the Beacon, right? Where we're basically seeing what's happening on the ground, getting that kind of local kind of responses. I mean, these are folks who are already doing that work, right? So, again, I know that one of the things that I'm going to be encouraging on those private groups is to be saying, hey, would you be, willing to send a version of this over to the Bucks County Beacon, right? And if they're nervous, I'll be happy to kind of edit it, right? This is an offer to everybody, right? To help work with you if you want to do, what will it look like to transfer that into an article? I will work with you and help you that to get it ready to kind of send to something like the Beacon, right? So that we start getting this kind of consistency of kind of reporting and focus on what's happening in our backyards, kind of back on the agenda.
Absolutely. We are a megaphone, the Bucks County Beacon, for community voices that you're not going to have elsewhere in Bucks County. So, our pages are always open, not only to op-eds, but just to kind of like do some like reporting summaries, going through the agenda about what was voted on, etc. And we're going to kind of, be expanding on that with some new writers that we've brought onto the fold as well. And they're gonna need your help to kind of get up to speed, because we're gonna have some new people covering Penridge, etc. So yeah, any kind of community help like that would be much appreciated.
100%. And this is just my one of my general uh, general things that I basically is my kind of like repertoire of things I say 1,001 times. Like there is like, let's make sure that we're not feeling we have to go back and reinvent the wheel on everything, right? Some things we're going to have to, some things are going to be new, some things are going to have to do different organizational models. However, things like making sure that we have an independent, say, progressive media infrastructure, right? We've got the Beacon. Like I've said to several people now, this is one of the reasons why, like, as owner of Raging Chicken Media, while I'm not doing my own separate podcast now, we're saying, look, we need to be really consolidating efforts to help build and support this, like this institution, the Bucks County Beacon. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to do exactly the same thing, right? But that's why pooling these kind of resources together. One of the things, like, and I'll give this the shout out, which I think is amazing, what like the Penridge Democrats, like what they did. There used to be like several little kind of small, kind of independent Democratic kind of clubs, if you will, kind of in the area, but recognizing what was happening, consolidated into one to kind of build that broader organization and recognize that we need to be all working together. Things like that are significant steps forward in building this infrastructure we keep talking about. Well, crazy. Well, Cyril, let me, I mean, like, I know we're kind of, I could just talk forever, and I know that, that you've had like a big week and probably still feeling the drag of dengue behind you. But one, I did want to kind of get your thoughts here. I know the Beacon has been covering what's happening with the race with Casey, that now that's going into a recount. Where do you see things in that race?
Yeah, I mean, I think one, it was automatically triggered, right? Because of the law, right?
Yep.
And because they got less than, the margin of victory was less than 0.5%. Everyone, whether it's, in theory at least, whether Republican or Democrat, should want every single vote counted.
Right.
Right. That should be the main thing. For some reason, Republicans don't seem to want that. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
And of course, they want to just hold on to this victory, this seat, and kind of like expand the margin in the Senate. There's going to be legal challenges moving forward. It's still it's almost an impossible hill to climb for Casey, if we're being honest,
Yep.
right? I think, election results have only been reversed twice from a recount. But I think, like, for the Democratic Party and just, local Democratic activists should just kind of just be working to ensure, at the very least, that every vote is counted.
Yeah. I was thinking about when I was looking at what Casey was doing there, and I was reminded of Timothy Snyder's book on tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century, that came out shortly after Trump was elected the first time. And it's a great book. If you've never taken a look at it or read it, do. It's really nice, short, easy. And it's just these kind of like, here's the lessons, right? And one of those lessons was do not obey in advance, right? And I see what Casey is doing here, saying, look, I'm not going out starting an insurrection, right? Basically, what I'm doing is like, I want to make sure, because it is a principle of democracy, that all the votes are counted, right? And so this is like, I think there's still votes out there. There's still a chance here. Pennsylvania has a law that automatically triggers, right, a recount. So let's the process play out. I'm not going to kind of submit and kind of basically say that, no, I've lost before we let that process play out. And I think for that reason alone is a fantastic lesson. I mean, I agree with your assessment. I mean, I think this is, the chances of actually Casey, taking that seat is slim, but not impossible, but we shall see when it comes in. But as a principle of like, no, we're not going to kind of submit in advance. This is the mistake that Al Gore made, right? Kind of way back in the day. And you don't just kind of like accept just because the AP has called it, right? The AP is the Associated Press. It is not the Pennsylvania kind of Department of Elections, right? It's not the Board of Elections, right? It's not the people who are actually counting the votes. So let's let the votes be counted. How about that?
Yeah, it just, it's called democracy.
It's called democracy. Yes, exactly. So yeah, we'll play, we're going to see what goes on. And I just hope my one hope for folks is like, I just hope people haven't put too many, all their eggs in that basket, right? To say that that's going to be just, we need to be realists about this stuff, right? And recognize the value of letting democracy function, right? And say, I'm not just going to submit, right? Just because I'm afraid or just because somebody's telling me I need to.
Yeah,
Right.
and if the roles were reversed, you'd have a mob of Republicans like banging on the windows of the
Right.
Board of Elections right now, demanding that they count every vote. So we can demand that every vote is counted more civilly than the Republicans would, but still firmly and assertively.
Yes, 100%. Well, a couple things I think before we go out. One, a lot of people that listen to this show, a lot of people that have been reading the Beacon, the people I know have been, I've been very happy to welcome them among my Blue Sky followers of late. I've been on Blue Sky for a while. There was an initial exodus after Musk bought Twitter and started to kind of change its algorithm and all that stuff. But that kind of was like a little spurt and it came out. This one seems a little bit more substantial. Is that you've had major announcements from different academic institutions, for example, that they're no longer going to be sharing stuff on Twitter because of its stuff, and they're moving over to Blue Sky. There's some, if you're nervous about making the switch from Twitter, everybody, let me tell you this: there's fabulous people over there that are putting together lists. Right, they're called starter packs. Right, you follow a couple people. You can follow me. You can follow Cyril. You can find people that on there. There's a lot of these little starter packs that'll give you kind of like get you up and running. Right, so there's one on, for example, Progressive News. Right, you can go there and get starter pack. You can follow everybody on that. Right, but I do think it's sensible for folks to get on over to Blue Sky. Look, if you're reluctant, I'm not telling you whether you should get rid of your Twitter account or not. Like, everyone's going to make that decision on their own. But I'm telling you, Blue Sky right now is the place where some of these discussions are happening. And it reminds me of the kind of space that Twitter used to be, right? Where you're actually having good discussions. There's great news feeds. There's, people are not there to just tear everybody else down. But really to kind of engage in what that space can be. So head on over to Blue Sky. There's all sorts of different tutorials online about how to go about do it. It's really simple. You don't need this kind of like big invite. There's not a big waiting period any longer like there used to be when it first launched. So I would say kind of head on over and follow me. I'm like RC Press. You can check out RC Press. Cyril, what's your handle over there?
Sure. At C Mychalejko.
Yep, at C Mychalejko, and go over to Blue Sky, and then we can help get you started there too as well.
Yeah, I had signed up a while ago, and to be honest, I just really haven't been active with it. But now I am going to kind of re-engage. Just the idea of another social media was just a little,
Yeah,
it was a little
yeah,
daunting for me personally, because I've had to spend so much time on social media already because a lot of the reporting and the media reporting with the Bucks County Beacon.
yep,
What I do has been on Twitter.
yep.
And I think the Bucks County Beacon will kind of gravitate over there as well. Although I do think, at least for the time being, we are going to stay on Twitter, because, despite it kind of being a toxic space in some respects, we still have a kind of a reach and an audience there that is engaged with us.
Yep.
But like you said, like it's nice to have something like Blue Sky, where we can kind of just really. I'm hoping it'll be a bit of a more of an organizing tool, and somewhere where you can kind of like engage in deeper, more meaningful conversations.
Yeah, and also it's like, I mean, people, for people who don't follow this stuff really closely, but the big deal is there what Twitter's or what Cyril said about like Twitter about being this space for like distribution. I mean, a lot of us who got in this space, this kind of independent media space for a while, this is the way that we got the word out, right? This is the way that you kind of like track stories when things were happening in a particular school district, or if things were happening like across the country or around a protest. People would be posting this stuff to Twitter. So that was kind of the sharing kind of environment where you're able to kind of really kind of do that close coverage and making sure that you're being responsive to what's actually happening, and then create that network of folks that you're distributing the product, right? Distributing the reporting, distributing that kind of stuff. Now, so there's going to be some like overlap in that, but I think that's been the big challenge. I think for any of us who've been doing this work is to say, well, yeah, we can move to another platform of a kind of a moral protest or something like this, but the pragmatics of it are like, unless you've got an audience that is both kind of like feeding into you, right? In other words, posting stuff that is of relevance to what's happening in the community that you want to follow up on, or wants to actually circulate and kind of receive right the reporting and of the media, then it's always been a challenge. So there will be this period of time where it'll take a while to kind of rebuild kind of audiences over on Blue Sky. But now I'm seeing the flood of people that have all these folks that I've been following on Twitter for years, that have been my go-to folks on from Twitter accounts, are now overall on Blue Sky. So I would encourage folks to, again, not saying you need to kind of delete Twitter, delete X, because there's still going to be things posted there by necessity of where our media environment works. But it would be a great thing, like, to be able to kind of say one day, right, in the not too distant future, just basically say, bye X, bye Elon Musk, because we're having a more say powerful conversation and more impact over here on Blue Sky. So that's my plug for Blue Sky. I take no endorsements from Blue Sky. I just want to be clear. I'm not like here as like a paid promotion, but I just like Elon Musk has so disgusted me at such a deep level, and what it's actually done to the algorithm and kind of damaged that space. We got to find another way of kind of building. So
Yeah, a bunch of our followers were purged immediately after the election.
yeah.
Which is something that was, troubling, and I'm assuming intentional, right? Done by Musk. Yeah. Oh, and I want to give a plug for something that I had talked about on a previous podcast on the Signal. This week I was on a Zoom call. I moderated a panel called "The Insurrection as American History: Teaching January 6th in the Classroom." So I was able to talk to Alan Jenkins and Gan Golan, and the local New York City educator Sari Beth, about using their graphic novel series 1/6, the graphic novel, in the classroom to teach about the insurrection. and you were just talking about Jason Stanley's book, Erasing History. Well, this is one history they're going to try to erase.
Yeah.
And then I think the first action of that will be, Trump pardoning these January 6th insurrectionists and domestic terrorists. But, you can go to 16comicsstore.com. It's a great series. I mean, it's really well written, great illustrations, obviously. I think,
Yeah.
Kevin, you had ordered it, didn't you?
Yeah, I got it. I read the first two. They're fantastic. And like, I swear, and I'll tell everybody's like, the second edition is a double edition, right? The second second issue. The second issue is a double issue, right? And then it ends on a freaking cliffhanger. So I can't wait for the next issue to come out. I mean, it's like I love the art. The art is phenomenal. The story is like kind of engaging. And what's really cool about it, is that a lot of the first issue is kind of like setting the stage. Like, here's all the things that happened, and they have a really interesting graphic, I guess, like style that they've done for everything. So ways of indicating what frames, like actually frame by frame of the comic, which frames are directly from and supported by like evidence, right? Which ones are kind of like, okay, we have evidence for it, but it's not like direct evidence, like it's indirect evidence that, it's been reported on, but we don't have like a document to do that, but it's something that's reported on and established. And so there's that distinction. And then a third one is stuff that's fictional, right? Where it's about these particular characters or something like this. Phenomenal way of doing it, right? And then there's a resource list, right? Of like, you want to know, like, okay, what's all the documentation? What's all the evidence that's supporting each one of these frames? It's there. Just wonderful.
And they partnered with the Western States Center to put out an action guide, which I just put into the, into the chat, the live stream chat.
Fantastic. Yeah, that was really cool. Is that available? Is that something that can be replayed? Do you know offhand?
Yeah, so there is a password protected Zoom recording. I'm gonna work on us getting that out and available. Maybe sending it through our newsletter.
Gotcha. When I saw that, I was like, this is so cool. And I couldn't be there for it, which is unfortunate. Like, I just couldn't jump in.
Yeah, it was a great conversation. We talked for about 45 minutes and then took some Q&A from folks. So yeah, we'll definitely get that out and make that available. Yeah, and definitely order with Christmas and the holidays around the corner. Yeah. It makes a great gift as well.
100%. Well, we got some great stuff coming up on the Signal too, as well. I could mention at the top of the show. But Cyril, I always like to leave, like, before we leave here, get a sense of like, what's happening at the Beacon, the things coming up you want people to watch, things that have articles that are dropping, anything you want to share about what's happening right now.
Sure. So, we already talked about my episode with Rotimi dropping on Sunday. There'll also be another episode and a book review coming out of Vigilante Nation, How State-Sponsored Terror Threatens Our Democracy. And me and one of the authors, David Null, we talk about the history of vigilantism in the United States. For example, one of the most, infamous vigilante groups was the Ku Klux Klan, right? Yeah. And then today, we have, from the same legacy groups like the Proud Boys or Kyle Rittenhouse. And now there's a movement to kind of legalize this vigilantism. So we're seeing that in Texas, right? With, tracking down, women seeking out abortion health care. Or even, there's been essentially bounties put on the heads of teachers, right? And groups like the PA Family Institute wanting, students and parents and teachers to be informants. Like, this is like, the East Germany, right? Back during the Soviet Union. And he kind of talks about the threat of this second Trump administration and kind of employing their vigilante and if not, paramilitary wings to kind of enforce their agenda. I think one particular piece of the Trump agenda where we could see this really come to fore is with his mass deportation program.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a really important book. It also has like an action plan for blue states, to fight back and be a line of defense against these plans, whether it's barring interstate travel for abortion health care. And we've already seen like an uptick of out of state women coming into Pennsylvania for abortion health care because it's banned in their respective states. So that will drop in the next week or so. Pat LaMarche is going to continue on with her reporting on homelessness and housing issues. And so we'll have something new from her next week. When we get off, I'm going to be dropping an op-ed from Connor O'Hanlon about building a greater society locally and what that might look like. Something we kind of just talked about earlier in the podcast. Yes, so we're going to kind of continue on, just kind of pushing both like the local stories, whether with school board issues, uh, supporting local immigrant communities, poverty and homelessness issues, as well as kind of like keeping track of what's happening nationally and how that can affect us locally, because quite frankly, you're just not going to find that anywhere else in Bucks County.
Well, that's 100% sure. And look, like I said at the top of the show, we're going to need kind of independent, community supported media, right? And this time ahead. And, so you get a chance. Look, there's not a better time. Take a moment, head on over to buckscountybeacon.com, click on the support the beacon button, nice big yellow button kind of on the page, become a supporter. You become a monthly supporter for as little as $5 a month, yearly supporter for as little as $50 a year, or you drop a one-time donation to help keep the Beacon's lens focused and sustainable. And there's that new kind of level of hey, look, you don't have a lot to spare at this point. You can even become a supporter for $1 a month. $1 a month, just kid in and basically say, hey, look, I support the Beacon, right? I support the Beacon and we're out here. We're behind you. That $1 a month kind of sends that message that kind of we're on board here. We're going to do what we can to kind of support what happens to the Beacon. So, well, Cyril, I guess all of us have got our work cut out for us in the kind of days, weeks, and months and years ahead. So I guess let's get to work, right?
Absolutely, Kevin.
All right, well, here we go. Well, Cyril, have an awesome weekend. For all of you tuned in today, kind of join us in the live chat. Please, thank you so much for joining us. Continue to support what's going on. We see you, we hear you, and we support the work that you are doing in there. We know that these times can be kind of lonely times. It can be times that are kind of they can feel times for despair, but know that we are here together. We are here kind of doing this work together. And certainly we're going to use our voices to help support that too as well. So have a great weekend, Cyril.
You too, Kevin.
Here we go, everybody. I got the music working. Did you see that? All right, everybody. Have a great weekend. Keep up the fight, all right? We're out of here.